So I'll just quickly introduce everybody that's involved in this session, and then you guys can introduce yourselves in more detail. We got Randy Willis from AJV 115, is it?
Correct.
All right. And Maureen Keegan, AJV 72 or 3, I always forget. 73, AJV 73. Brett Steffi from AJV 8 what? Just AJV 8?
AJV 8.
Just fine, okay, just AJV 8.
AJV 8. That's good.
And Sherry Majaritz from NextGen
C5.
C5, okay. So those are our 4 primary panelists, and then for the human factors specialists in this ATC panel, we have Carl Kaufman from the PMO. That's a program management organization in the air traffic organization. We have Valerie Gauran again from MITRE, Kenneth Allendorfer, who is at the William J. Hughes Technical Center running the Human Factors Lab there, and Sherry Chappell, who is in my division in the Human Factors Office in NextGen, as a program manager for Human Factors Research. So that's everybody involved. So why don't we just start with Randy and work down the line. Like I said, 5-10 minutes or so just to let us know about your world. And also, before you start, actually, I always forget I'm asking Michelle Duquette to sort of moderate with me. And Michelle, she's from MITRE, and if you have any opening remarks, just quickly about who you are and what you want to see out of this.
I'm the UAS lead for MITRE CASD, the FAA's FFRDC, and apparently I'm asked up here to help these operational type allow each other to talk. so we'll see how that goes.
All right. So Randy, take it away.
All right, thanks, Bill. I guess you can hear me. I don't want to hover over the mic, but anyway, Randy Willis, manager. If you don't know what AJV 115 is, it's actually within the air traffic organization. The team I lead is the emerging technologies team, and we have about 35 people, both federal employees and contractors that do several things. So we do the policy part in the air traffic organization for UAS. So we have the UAS notice and orders that's there and on the street, and the advisory circular that's out for the community to follow, advisory circular 91-57A, change 1. So that's out there. We have that part. We also do elements in international, so with both the CAO and CANSO organizations. So we have activities both related to UAS or remotely piloted aircraft systems. Take your choice of what term you want to use with that. We also support activities, or had support activities in research and development. So back in 2008, when a lot of the agency didn't have UAS work, we had UAS work, and we needed some questions and answers on some things. So we put forth some ideas, and we did a total of 3 studies at the Tech Center on UAS, both 2 of them dealing, actually all 3 involving the terminal operational environment, one specifically for Class D tower environment, and the other 2 simulated TRACON airspace out near in Oakland, out of Northern California TRACON airspace. And those were to look at contingency operations, AKA lost link, and how those would affect normal traffic flows and patterns, and how controllers would react to providing the service to them. So the studies were not human factors related studies, but if you read the study, there are elements in there that discusses human factors, and also provides, actually, I believe you can find some gaps or things out of those studies from that part. Right now, R&D wise, we basically support and provide subject matter expertise to other offices that now have UAS work within their offices, and those would be asked to go out and carry on these type of studies in order to inform their policy creation and or procedure development associated with that. So we support that way. We also have a tactical side dealing with that. So we issue all the COAs for flight And we coordinate with several offices within the FAA to ultimately sign out the approval for all flight. So both for the public aircraft operators, DoD, NASA, DHS, you name it, and then all the commercial activities that's happened through Section 333. So once they go through the exemption process, they'll come to my office and we do the final operational approval and sign out for them too. So that's 115 in a nutshell, and I don't want to take up too much time. So
Can I just ask quickly, Randy, is because of your ICAO involvement, there is some human factors work going on there.
good
Can you
point.
can you just briefly touch upon that?
absolutely. So so the KO remotely piloted aircraft systems panel. So I'm the U.S. member to the panel, and I'm currently vice chair of the panel. The panel has 7 working groups within it, and one of them is human factors, or actually it's human in the system working group. I didn't make the name, someone else did. KO has a mandate to incorporate human factors considerations in all the work that they do. And what we asked the Air Navigation Commission was that we wanted to form a working group in order to invite and entice expertise to come to participate on the RPAS panel from that. Beforehand, we didn't have the expertise on the panel. So right now, this working group consists of a whopping 4 people with that. And our representatives from the United States is Stephen Pliszka. Where's he at? He was there earlier today. So he assists me there, and also we have Jay Shively from NASA with that. And actually, Jay is the rapporteur of that working group, and he leads that activity. And the 2 other doctors that are on the working group full-time are both out of the UK. And also grab Alan Hobbs. I think he's on loan to NASA somehow through some agreement. So he's participated and helped out on the U.S. side for that. So their mandate or their job is to basically look at all the other working groups that exist there: airworthiness, communications, detect and avoid, operations, licensing, and ATM. There to look at across all working groups and to find human factors pieces where human factors language or text should be incorporated into standards that's created out of our working group. So that's it.
Okay, Maureen Keegan from AJV 73. AJV 7 basically looks at new concepts, operational requirements, and how we can actually satisfy those operational requirements in the NAS. In general, the question between 72 and 73, our 72 element is our subject matter experts, they're operations guys, and then 73 are our more project management technical side of the house. So I'm on the technical side of the house. For UAS, we've been working since about 2012 pretty steadily on understanding the concept of operations. And it's interesting because Sherry and I give this pitch together all the time, and she always goes first and then I go second, so I'm going to challenge her to follow up from me being twisted around now. But basically, we looked at the ConOps and said, okay, what do we really know about how this concept will actually impact air traffic management? How are we going to go about doing that? And if you take the ConOps and you dissect it down into requirements for the FAA and things that we know and things that we don't know, we came up with a set of things that we're calling our shortfalls. And we look at that and we say, okay, what can we do in the system today, and what are we expecting to be able to do in the system in, say, the 2025 timeframe, given the next-gen capabilities that will be coming along, and then, you know, what might we need even beyond that. So we've taken those shortfalls and said some of them are kind of a here and now, and I will say that AJV7 is focusing, since we look at things that would require a lot of times change to automation systems. You have to give, you know, the AMS process and development process some time to actually get in there. So a lot of the stuff that we focus on is more for the beyond 2021 capabilities. We are supporting, as we can, some of these more near-term activities that you've been hearing about this morning with, Part 107 and the authorization, and what does that really look like, and can we come up with some kind of automation to help with that whole process? So we did help with generating the requirements in that area, but then have basically handed it off to the PMO for, how would we implement that stuff. So we're focused a little bit more on what we call the midterm and the mature state, which are a little bit further out. We've taken the shortfalls and our lay of the land, which was basically back 2 years ago before we started really having a better understanding of how we thought UAS would be integrated in the NAS. We came up with our own view of what we called our operational evolution strategy, so that we could understand the priority of handling certain things sooner rather than later, right? If we're waiting on technology anyway, then okay, that can probably wait a little while because we need the technology to support it. If it's operations that we thought, well, we should be able to do these today, then we would want to make sure that they're as whole as they can be sooner. So we went through a prioritization process that way and took each of the shortfalls and came up with what we call our concept maturation plan. And it lays out all of the areas that we think we have to look at deeper because we don't truly understand all of the ins and outs of it. Some of it you've heard about, the contingency operations. What about lost link? What about lost comm? What about situations where we don't exactly understand what the latency is going to be in comm, or for lost link, how long do you really want them to be lost link before they squawk, the code and whatnot? So we went through all of that stuff and prioritized it. And if you look in our concept maturation plan, we actually have lists of questions. Here are the questions that we have in this area. Here are the questions that we think have to be addressed. And they've all been prioritized over the next 3 years, 16, 17, and 18. And our hope is to be able to get through those concepts and define them further so that we understand whether we have an automation requirement, whether we think it's procedures, we just need a new procedure to hand something, whether it's an airspace issue, whether it's a policy issue. So we're not just looking at automation, we're looking at the requirement satisfaction, right? And so you would help other organizations realize, what we think the open area is and what has to be done about it. So as far as human factors is concerned, almost everything we're looking at has some human factors element. The one thing we are looking at that, I don't know, is it human factors or isn't it, would be performance characteristics on some of the algorithms within our automation system. Okay, does human factors play in that? Well, maybe, I don't know. You can help me figure that one out. But so, if you look at our conflict probe or conflict alert, these UAS fly differently or have different mins and maxes as far as what performance they're capable of doing. So that's some of the more engineering oriented, do the algorithms have to be tweaked, or what can we expect as far as the results out of that? So in a nutshell, since we are a organization who put together requirements to follow the acquisition management system, we're looking for requirements to be defined by the end of 2018 so that we can actually go through the AMS process and have things operational by 2025. That's a long term. So if you look at that, how long it takes to make that happen, we also have to look at for windows of opportunity to better define things sooner, and is there an opportunity to actually implement something sooner? Is there a workaround before you get to the ultimate, automation solution, that kind of thing? So in a nutshell, I gave you like the really shortened version of how we're approaching the whole UAS problem, and we'll see how we engage further on.
Good afternoon, everybody. Brett Steffi from AJV 8. My official position is AJV 85. I'm an ops guy, really, 26 years in the field. AJV 85 is actually future standards and procedures. AJV 8 is standards and procedures. We're kind of the last line of defense, really, for what we put in the book with controllers. That's our concern. Procedures that these controllers are actually going to utilize when we run into these type scenarios that you all are looking at for the human factors link, whether it's lost link, whether it's a flyaway, whatever the case may be. What are these controllers going to do? That's our biggest concern. Additionally, besides those things, we're also subject matter experts. There's actually, probably from AJV 8, there's 5 of us right now. And we're kind of a band of folks that Jack Allen put together in the last 2 years to kind of work together and see what type things we can help all the engineers with, not only from RTCA, because we attend those meetings as well, what type things we want on these platforms. Let's start being consistent about what we have on the platform so we know what these units are actually doing. We work very closely, and Randy, actually, thank you, Randy, for taking a lot of my spiel this morning, or this afternoon. We work very closely with Randy's folks, the notices, the orders that he was referring to. We're all SMEs when it comes to that. In fact, we're working very closely right now on the 107 order that's going to come out very shortly. You all know that about August 29th is the start date for the small UAS rule. And it's been up to the folks that I work with as well as Randy's folks. I don't think you have any folks on that one, do you? I don't think so.
Well, we're reacting to it.
Yeah, you're reacting to
That was
it.
part of the automation system. Can it help with the authorization piece?
Exactly, exactly. So we've been working very closely on the UAS order, trying to get it out. It's kind of interesting because we have so many fingers in the pot, and I want to give Maureen credit for this. She contacted us about a month ago and said, you know, we still seem to be duplicating our efforts in a lot of areas. And she and her folks have put the opportunity together for all of us to kind of join, and instead of being AJV 7, AJV 115, AJV 8, et cetera, all of us come together and kind of try to work a little bit more cohesive on what we're actually working on. I've been in headquarters now for over a year and a half, and again, having been in the field for 28 years, I was shocked at the different numbers of groups that are working on things, and those things are the same things. And again, as an ops guy, that's very, very frustrating because you see it, but you don't know how to fix it, okay? So having said that, we have a group of folks, actually 2 gentlemen that have been traveling with Sherry. And Bill, I don't know if you've been on those trips as well, but they've been traveling with Sherry to several different facilities out there to start asking the questions. The information that Randy gathered back in 13, I think it was more a terminal type situation. Now we're beginning to look at the en route situation. And one of the biggest problems we have, folks, is when you talk about procedures, we have to keep procedures very simple but standard. And what we're running into with these different platforms is these different platforms perform differently. I don't care if it's a Global Hawk, a Reaper, whatever. I can have Global Hawk 1, and he may do one procedure in a lost link. I may have Global Hawk 2, and he does another procedure in lost link. And we don't have anything out there in the field right now, any standard procedures that these controllers can follow. So this was a great opportunity for our folks to go out with Sherry to these facilities and say, okay, basically, what are you all doing? What happens in this scenario? What happens in this scenario? They actually got to talk not only to the airspace folks, the specialists of these particular facilities, but also we work very closely with NATCA, and NATCA also provided 4 or 5 probably personnel per facility, something like that, to try to get some questions answered. These folks even took a step further, and it was per the suggestion, I think, of NATCA, to go to a facility that really doesn't work UAS and find out if they were to come into your airspace, what would you do? To try to get another perspective on it. So we're hoping that the information that they gather, as well as what we already know and what we find out in these the human in the loop studies, whatever the case may be, we can sit down and develop some very good standard procedures for en route controllers to follow. It's one of the most difficult things to do. You think it'll be very simple, but when we write a particular procedure, you get 10 people to read it, you'll get 10 different opinions on it. So it actually forces our hand to make sure we have all the research done, to make sure we've talked to all the individuals involved that we want, try to get all the information we can to get the right procedure out there. So besides SME, we do the notices, the orders, we work with these groups right here. We try to be all one big happy family because we know at some point in time I'm going to have to come to Maureen and she's going to have to sign off on something that she doesn't really want to sign off on, but I need it today. So we want to keep the relationship as happy as we can.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
And Brett, and you're talking about this Sherry, not that Sherry, right?
This Sherry,
That was
yeah,
that Sherry.
yeah, this Sherry down here, yeah. I'm sorry.
Just to clarify. And just that research project, I just want to make a note that you know, it was a human factors group that you know, we understood some of the requirements coming down from Randy at the time, and you know, used our own kind of, we were sort of proactive in making that happen, and then of course getting all of you involved eventually when the research started kicking off. But It was kind of hard to make it happen. I mean, because it was sort of ad hoc, and we just it was sort of driven by us, not you, but based on your requirements. And so in the future, as I'd like you guys to think about how we can make that happen more systematically, where you're reaching out to us or having a dialogue with us to create more of these kinds of things. And so it doesn't happen. We don't have a lot of opportunities with our own money to make these kinds of things happen, but it's hard to have the conversation without putting something in place. So maybe we can have that.
Well, one additional thing with that is when the two gentlemen came back from the facilities, they provided me with excellent briefings on what was going on in those facilities. So because of you folks facilitating that opportunity for us to visit those facilities, which is kind of hard for us to do if we hadn't used you or worked with you as the vehicle to do that, it was a wealth of knowledge for these two gentlemen. So it's been very, very beneficial for us, and hopefully we can continue those things.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherry Majoritz. I work in the Next Gen Advanced Concepts branch, ANGC 5. And I think Maureen covered most of what I was going to say, because like she said, I usually start. So I'm going to go back before her discussion about some of our strategic plans and requirements development. And really, my involvement with UAS is really more in the concept realm. We talked about the development of the concept for integrated operations. That was the 2012 document. That's when I started working on UAS. Anyway, with that document, we covered really what's more applicable to, it's beyond visual line of sight, it's more the larger UAS, you learn more as you go along. But in recent years, we started to try to address sort of the gap between what we think our vision is in the mature state, where we are today, and this big wide space in the middle, what does that look like? And I think the main point about the work that we've done is we've tried to take a very structured approach, starting with the ideas, vetting them with the community, with the stakeholders within the FAA, and most of our work is from an operational perspective, which is sort of how I think I landed on the ATC segment. All of this work was in collaboration with our air traffic SMEs, but also collaborating across lines of business. So I think our structured approach is really what we're most proud of. With all of our concepts, we've decomposed them into a set of sort of workable pieces, potential requirements, policy perhaps that needs to be made, actions on the FAA to do something, sort of a big set of all that. And anyway, that's what ended up in our concept maturation plan, which I think for the human factors folks, I agree with Maureen. I think especially when you're dealing with new ideas and something like UAS, which is so different, there's human factors involved in all aspects of what we do. And I think to your point, Bill, about us reaching out, I also think that, and we've shared our concept maturation plan, we would also like to welcome your input on where you think you see some of the human factors attention needs to be made. I think we would welcome that input as well. So anyway, with the structured approach, now we're starting to really delve into the UTM realm as well through this RTT, and I think our plan is to continue to apply our approach of making sure we all agree on a concept for what it is that we're looking at, trying to understand from that who's responsible for what. Is it something on the operator? Is it something on the FAA? And then within the FAA, who takes it on? Applying that same approach to UTM, I think, is what's going to make us successful. So I think once we get through the UTM phase, we've really covered, at least from a concept phase and an operational perspective, the gamut of the evolution of UAS operations, from starting with maybe something beyond what the initial Part 107 gives you in the visual line of sight realm, to the extended visual, to beyond visual line of sight, but not yet meeting the requirements that we've laid out for that integrated story. I think our work has tried to cover that whole evolution, and again, has broken it down into sort of workable pieces. These are ideas, and they have to be validated and invalidated, and again, there's human factors elements to all of that. So I think that's pretty much it. I think Maureen covered the rest of what I would have said is we've captured all of this in our strategic plans moving forward, and I think it's just a two-way interaction that we need to continue moving forward to make sure that we try to cover all this. Not all of it is research. We don't have the time, the funding, or not all of it are research topics. Some of it is just discussions that need to be had, decisions that need to be made. But again, I hope that, we can make it a two-way exchange on how to get there. So, thank you.
Okay, well, we can turn it over to the panelists to offer your points on what they said and questions, of course, and we'll prioritize you guys first and then the rest of the audience as well. And
We should probably prioritize Mr. Willis. He's got exactly 6 minutes before he's got to depart.
that's right. Good point. So, in
I
particular.
do apologize for that, sorry.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you still making it despite your constraint. So, okay.
So in the last time, I didn't get,
There are no complaints allowed.
no complaints, all right, all right. So we talked about everything else is changing as well as the UAS. So you guys are moving towards traffic flow managers, and that's a whole moving train, and now you've got this on there. Where's the thought to where the two meet? Right, so we're going from a controller who's very tactical to people who are more strategic. UASs tend to be more tactical. We have the Air Force talking about multi-UAVs. They want to do it where they would potentially have different beacon codes, and they'd be across different sectors, but it's one operator. How do you think about handling that? So I guess I'm pushing you really far in your concept development to be able to handle something that our military, and I know our Department of Homeland Security wants to do as well. So now that I dropped that bomb, I'm going to sit down.
I'll take the first stab. So that is just one of many challenges that's facing this. So it's a perfect example of technology and people's ideas are getting out way in front of everybody else's ability to enable those operations. It has forced many offices within the FAA to think and do things differently than what we've done in the past. A lot of legacy programs or processes, if you want to call it or label it that, are really being pushed and tested with UAS in order to meet the overwhelming demand and desire to do more. Then you have this, obviously the safety aspect that goes with it, and the safety person always sits in the back, lets the conversation happen until a certain point, and then they raise their hand. So that's happening also to do that. So we're really going back, say, okay, all right, we need to do something different, but we also need to remember to do it safely. And enabling swarms, enabling multiple aircraft under one operator is just one of those areas that we've captured in my office as from a policy perspective. How do we address that? Or even more so, and then I'll let Brett finish the last part of it, because it ultimately affects the individuals out in the field, and what do we need to provide to them in order to enable it. And to be perfectly honest, when is it needed? And many ideas and concepts that are out there today, it's our job to ensure that we don't run at the next best thing and put resources and money into something that's just fly by night. So that didn't work. Sorry, we're gonna go try something else, and we invested all this time and effort into enable it, and it's not. So in my opinion, a lot of that stuff still needs a tremendous amount of research and development, tests and evaluation before it even makes it to the FAA. But it seems like that RDT&E piece is being skipped today, and they're coming right to the FAA and missing that. So I'll leave it there, but I can probably talk all day concerning that part and how we're being challenged with it. So if anybody else wants to say anything.
So I think the other flavor of exactly what Randy said was there's a flavor of the exception and the norm, right? So we're trying to take within our office, we're trying to take those things that should be the norm and make sure that they get into kind of that common practice kind of phase. Certain things will continue to be the exception until there's a reason to make them the norm. either because we've had enough time to really do all of the analysis and get it into the, okay, that can be now an accepted practice without exception, or it will stay an exception because there's not really the reason to go there with maybe the expense of making it the norm. So that's just a little bit of a different flavor. Because yes, I mean, there's some really cool ideas out there, but that doesn't mean that we can give up on some of this other stuff that has to be the norm first. Because that other stuff, to us, it's still cool stuff, but you have to see, how the research and all plays out.
So the cool stuff that Maureen talks about, I've got to work with a lot of that cool stuff. One of the major problems that I have is this whole waterfall concept where we come up with an idea and all of a sudden we're going to put it in every facility because that's just what we do, okay? A lot of money is spent on that, and I totally disagree with that. So we need to do a better job at identifying what the facilities are actually going to use, number one, what equipment, what programs we can put in there that are beneficial. Now keep in mind, when I'm talking about beneficial, I'm talking about beneficial to the commercial and GA aircraft. I can almost guarantee you that nobody thought that this particular software program, or whatever it is, the widget, we were going to have to integrate UAS into this thing. So we have a couple airports right now that I know a couple of commercial operators are upset that they are running integrated patterns with UAS right now. And there's concern over that. I'm not sure how that was vetted at that particular facility. I don't know whether you know anything about that or not, Randy, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, maybe you can speak before you leave, but so there's concern over that. So this equipment that we're putting out there and all this money that we're spending is designed for commercial big jets. And now we're trying to integrate something else into the system that we're not even sure how we're going to do that really doesn't fit into this software. And that's a problem. That is a big problem. So you talk about the procedures that controllers are going to use for GMS, a ground interval management system, for TSAS, whatever the case may be. Do I have to have a whole separate set of procedures now for UAS? Well, the answer is basically yes, because the DoD has been creating STARS and SIDS to major airports for a while now for UAS. The controllers in the FAA, unless it might be an integrated airport, I don't know if they're using it or not, if it's just DoD facilities, but that's something that we're looking at as well. And those are going to in no way be able to be worked or be flown by a commercial jet. It's going to be probably mirrored to what the procedure was, but it's going to be a lot lower, a lot slower, et cetera, because we got to keep them separated and keep them out of the pattern. So there's my answer to that.
I'll give Randy the opportunity if you need to bolt.
Yeah, if I can follow up. You want
you
to
can
follow up,
bolt.
then I can
Okay.
bolt?
All right.
All right, I'll drop my bomb, then leave.
Yeah.
So we joked about that before, but this is my opportunity. No, those operations are taking place, so we are finding opportunities such as Syracuse Class C airspace, and they have routine commercial operations in there, and they have a Reaper squadron that is there also, and they are incorporating and doing pattern operations in there to maintain proficiency within that. So those are happening today, going through and worked with the facility and SMS and all that other good stuff in order to do that. And they are, to some degree, segregated. They don't sit there and follow the 737 on final and all that other stuff. That doesn't happen. But nonetheless, they're operating in and out the same airport. There's many Department of Defense airfields that are having the integrated operations today with that. And I've gone and seen and viewed that. There's several procedures and things that they have in place. Some things work better than others. Depends on the topography around you and what the UAS pilot can see from their camera and not see. And what they've already identified on the ground as their points in which they need to turn downwind or base or anything. So there's a lot of pieces involved with that. And all that I see right now is us trying to figure out a way to go forth in what Marie said, the norm, right? So we're still figuring out the norm in a lot of our areas. And don't even get me started on the small stuff. Because there's so many things and so versatile in which they can do is changing our entire thought process of concerning how to integrate them and for them to operate and how close can they operate to an airfield environment, what's safe, what's not safe, dealing with that, still trying to figure all that stuff out today. And, I don't know. It's hard to say where we'll go and what's the next best thing for us. But I think the current ops that we have going on today is going to drive us where we go in the near term, because we'll get that feedback from the controller workforce saying, hey, this is working, or hey, this needs to be fixed. And it'll drive a lot of our near-term work from that point. But nonetheless, it doesn't stop us of doing our right thing and thinking in the future of where to go and to enable all these concepts that are being brought to the agency. So, not much of a bomb, but anyway, so. All right, again, I do apologize. I do have to leave and attend, we have a all-hands meeting today, and I'm part of the all-hands, so, all right, thank you.
Aren't they watching this?
Huh? No, I think they're gonna wait for the DVD.
Yeah,
so,
okay. Okay, well, thank you. Let's get an applause for Randy. You're going to miss my question on how to do visual compliance. Okay.
That's actually probably a good question, 'cause I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
So coming from the PMO perspective, and what I think Kathy in the previous session was talking about, the very applied side of things, what could we, the collective we as the group here in the room, do to make sure that we don't end up with programs hitting the PMO, starting to be developed and fielded that are essentially UAS tool A, UAS tool B, that are bolted on to what's out there now? I think Steve Van Trees in the previous session said when they were working the aircraft side of things, or the pilot side of things, they didn't start with an overall view of the NAS. They started building individual pieces. So collectively as a community and as an agency, what can we do to not run down that same pathway?
Well, I'll say the work in AJV7 takes the NAS and what already exists in consideration as we're even looking at requirements. I mean, and that's where I was saying, we don't even really think from the very beginning, oh, this has to be automation, right? I mean, you go there when you say, yes, that's going to make it more efficient, more effective or whatever, but it may be as simple as an updated procedure that really addresses your question. So within AJV 73, when I said we do the technical analysis, that's all based on the current NAS, what is out there. And I will tell you that most all of the work that we're doing within 73, we work on probably 20 different projects right now. I don't believe any of them are new boxes. It is, what is the modification that we can make to the existing system? And oh, by the way, when is the right window of opportunity to make that happen? Because almost anything out there is already on some kind of a delivery time schedule, right? And it's all about the prioritization and the funding and whether you can get in into the cycle where you need to be in order to meet whatever your milestone is. My background is in project management. You know, I wasn't the PMO at the time, but I was affiliated with STARS and ARTS and ERAM and all of the major programs, as have been a lot of the people who are working in 73. So we have some kind of a background of what are these systems and, you know, what are they already capable of doing, and what would that look like if we were trying to make a modification. So right now, I don't believe there's really any tag-on thing. Even the we call it a mechanism because we didn't want to go so far as to define exactly what it was. But even the ability to do the notification and authorization for the Part 101E hobbyist and Part 107 authorization piece, even that has already considered, okay, what can SWIM bring to the picture? You know, I mean, so it also is looking at, you know, how can we look at our existing infrastructure and tack onto it in order to enable things. So I don't think there's a whole lot of risk, at least from the stuff that we're doing within 7, that we're often, you know, our own little world thinking we're creating something new. We're really trying to integrate it into the NAS from the beginning.
Okay, human factors people? Any more?
My question is, how can we, as human factors experts, help you to develop your requirements and your procedures. And I think that this is a bigger problem, or bigger offer, I guess, than just for UAS. But we have the ability to, of course, measure human performance, but even before that, we can evaluate procedures in terms of just their solid human factors principles. And it seems to me that maybe there would be an opportunity for us to get involved, while it's still draft, in terms of developing both the requirements and the procedures. Just putting that out there.
I think with what you've started here now, at least for UAS, is a great start. I'm not so sure that all the procedures we have in the book as we speak today have gone through a human factors testing. Could they be better? Oh, I would certainly say that the procedures could be a little better. The problem is right now for us is we basically don't have time to look at that. All this new stuff is coming in so quickly and being developed and created. Like what's new today is old tomorrow, right? Just with your computers, we used to say that and laugh, but it's very, very true now in the UAS world. So we have to make sure that the procedures that we're going to use are going to be solid, but also kind of working with the current procedures we have today with the existing traffic, right? We don't want to create anything for UAS that's going to create a problem for what we already have in the system for what we utilize for commercial, GA, along those lines. That's what I think with that. I think what you've done so far, though, the information I received back from Kevin and Brian was huge, absolutely huge. So definite benefit.
And it's okay. So to add on to the procedural perspective, also then just from the conceptual side, I think for us up here, I think we have engaged with you all to some degree already. But I think an additional way that you could help is, again, we share sort of the things that we think we need to look at. When we talk about requirements, they're really at varying levels of detail. There's some high-level statements. There's some more cooked stuff that we feel more confident about. Anything that you could help drill down, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and even getting more definition of what those are, and validating it and validating. So we already have some joint work set up with you, but again, encourage you to look at our products to help us decide too what you think you could contribute to help, again, further define or validate. We're open to all that. Do you agree, Maureen?
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to add because I took part of your question to be in general, not even just UAS specific. So in general, how can human factors have more of an impact on programs, development, procedures, whatever's going on? And maybe part of that is an educational program that you take on in general, right? So you understand what the life cycle of a program or the life cycle of a requirement is. Maybe helping us understand that human factors isn't just colors on the glass, right? That there is more to it, and this is what it looks like in the concept phase where you don't even really know whether you have a requirement or not. And this is what it looks like at, a training phase or whatever. Because, going back, I have my scars from when human factors got involved because the glass wasn't right. And I say that jokingly, but back then it was like, these people, It was in the early days of human factors in the agency, might I mention STARS. So I think that really trying to go through and those steps and say, this is what human factors means at this state in the program. This is what human factors means at this phase in a concept development. And that helps us understand, oh, yeah, you're right. We really do need that expertise on the team.
Yeah, and I want to say that there's often a misconception that it's human factors is just research, and when it is just research, it's these expensive hiddles, and I think Sherry's point was that it can be all sorts of things and at various levels of involvement. So I think the real issue is how do we really get engaged? We're all going to go back to our cubes afterwards,
Right. So
and
you have to
might be-
help us understand that.
So, yeah, maybe we have to be proactive but we'll work towards that.
Well, and I mean, so I'm one of the managers in 73. I mean, and if you really came to me with a package that said, hey, just a matrix that says, as you're going through your, concept development process or your project lifestyle practice, this is what human factors, what role we could play to help you. If you were to give us something like that, I could even have you in to talk to our team, because they're all looking at different projects, different aspects, different phases of, maturity as far as where they are. And we're always looking for kind of informational, educational opportunities to show our team what other organizations do. So, I'll put that out there. I mean, I think it would be good for the organization to understand.
Well, it's very timely, actually, because we are writing our, overhauling one of the key AMS documents, the Human Factors Job Aid, which is guidance, but it was lacking in the earlier phases, concept development, CRD and
Yeah,
that kind of things. And so, we're in the middle of rewriting that, so we'll share that with you.
Yeah, no, we're looking for stuff like that.
So we've heard a couple of times people talk about being proactive. We heard it this morning, we just heard it again. And I think that we may, for the purposes of this forum, we may have just described a path, right? We have artifacts that are coming out of this group, and they are being pushed to do the best they can to understand the norms, to understand what the exceptions are, and keep moving the ball forward because the pressure's not letting up. It appears to me that you human factors, may have an opportunity to take a look at what they've done already and find where you fit. And then put that in this matrix that Maureen is talking about, so that as we move forward on this extremely aggressive thing called UAS, we might be able to put a plan together where we can start blending the two. Because as you've heard them say already, we need your help to help us understand where those human factors hiccups might be. That's your expertise. But until you know where to touch within the process, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that was an awesome identification that we just had. If nothing else happens from this forum today, good work.
And I think it'd be good to put some on your plate too, to say, hey, consider looking at this or that, and we can put resources as necessary. But it'll be a two-way street.
So Bill, I'm getting a text from Caroline and Todd as we speak.
Oh,
Could I maybe Valerie could go?
yeah, Valerie keeps getting trumped, I think, but
It's still pending, so why don't you go first?
I can say trumped without violating the Hatch Act, right?
I don't know, it's close.
Can't hear you.
I almost went all
So
the
the
way.
population of air traffic controllers is changing, right?
Val, get closer, please.
Even closer? All right. My mama taught me to be soft-spoken, so, all right. But the.
You are soft-spoken.
All right. That's a good thing. She'd be happy about that. But air traffic controller population is changing. And we're seeing a lot of young people coming in without some of that great experience that they can handle really unusual events. I was in Sacramento when we had an incident. I was in Haiti when we had an incident. And it was the senior guys, us gray hair guys, although I'm too old to be an air traffic controller anymore, who were able to do that. How are you thinking about the young ones who don't have that breadth of experience? And we're going to have lost link. We're going to have communications. We're already having spectrum issues with all the small little guys, right? What's kind of the plan to handle that? There's got to be some training requirements or some equipment requirements or some selection or something, right?
Well, that's what we're in the process of doing right now, and I'll just give you this small UAS is trying to develop this order, and with the order will come some training. And we need to get that training done to the newer controllers and the older controllers. Although, as you indicated, the older controllers might be able to handle a situation that popped up that maybe the younger controllers have not seen before, and they did it efficiently, and they said, hey, something to think about. That's an education piece, right? The younger controller just learned from that. But our biggest concern right now is getting procedures in the field that A, make sense, are understandable, and accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And I've got to keep it simple. I've got to keep it simple. Controllers have to remember too many things to worry about. A Reaper does this, a Global Hawk does that, et cetera. We want to make sure that we get those procedures out in the field. Not an easy job. It's got to be one standard procedure that covers the whole thing. And also keep in mind, too, that these facilities may be using these or the UAS, the bigger UAS, or the UAS may be operating differently in different geographical areas, right, for whatever purpose. And now, does that one procedure still cover that? I don't know. The benefit, again, of the group going out and asking questions.
Yeah, I did get it. This is a good question. So this one comes to us from our tech center folks who are up at who are listening in, but I'll ask it. So we've heard a lot about UTM today in some of the earlier panels from NASA and so on. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts about how UTM as envisioned, if it were to be implemented in some way that's pretty close to what's being envisioned there, if it were to get implemented like that, what might be some of the effects on terminal controllers in particular, but ATC in general, if there were this sort of segregated UTM where they're doing their thing, but there's some connection, some edges where it might run into the NAS. Anyone has some thoughts?
Well, you know, we're very quickly implementing all of these traffic management programs to try to better accommodate what we have out there right now and basically save fuel and keep the ticket prices low, right? That's really the main thing, keep the pressure on the runway. I have not worked with any of the unmanned traffic management initiatives, the procedures for any of that. I've not done any of that personal, so I really can't speak to that and the implementation of that. But I can tell you again, as I mentioned earlier, the systems that we have out there right now probably would not be the best systems to start trying to integrate UAS with. Different speeds, different platforms, different this, different that. The systems are pretty much pushed to the max right now with what they're doing, and we're going in and laying in new adaptation on top of new adaptation on top of new adaptation. And some of these adaptations haven't even been updated in a long time of the original equipment that was put in. So my concern is just overloading the systems, number one, and not really using the system what it was designed for. You're talking about a whole different product in the airspace now. Are you guys familiar with the UTMs and all?
I was just going to add that I think all these questions are still out there, Kenneth, honestly. I mean, we're really just kicking off we're really getting it going with the RTT. I think the plan would be initially to start, you know, in areas where we're not going to have need for any air traffic interaction. Start there, start to understand how this could work, and then start to incrementally add some complexity to it. I mean, I think we know that there's going to be ties potentially to our systems at certain points, but I don't think that's going to be, I think that's going to take some time to develop. I think it's just still too early.
Hey, Kenneth, I think there was a follow-up. Maybe you didn't get in your text that came in
They're sending
remotely.
me stuff. They're sending me more stuff. Okay.
This is pseudo real time, right? Feedback, yeah.
Twitter feed going on. So this is again comes from the website. So well, it's about UTM, so maybe we're saying it's too soon, but maybe we can sort of put the UTM part aside. How does it work when UAS operators are not cooperative or compliant? So what would be some of the questions you would have if there were operators who were, call it, bad guys, people who are doing things that are, maybe they're doing a prank or just stunt or doing something that is, maybe they're not compliant because they don't know about air traffic control. So what might be some of the air traffic issues that you might be interested to learn about? Or
So are you referencing the small UAS?
could be. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's where the question comes from, but could be anybody really who is entering the system. Maybe you can't communicate with them. They're a low-time UAS pilot.
So I really think that's geared more towards small UAS. I mean, the large UAS are going to be on IFR.
Right.
Flight plans, they're professional pilots. They've done this for years. And we really don't have any issue there except for lost link, latency, all the things we've already talked about here in the past 45 minutes, and you've probably talked about since early this morning. When small UAS right now, I don't know if we're going to have a small UAS police or not. We are actually in the rules that we're trying to come out with in these orders and so on and so forth. And the way the law is written as well is that unmanned, not vehicles, Renee doesn't like that word, unmanned systems that are out there flying around, all right, cannot endanger manned systems, cannot endanger manned flights. That's the biggest part of this whole thing, is that the responsibility is on you as the operator. In fact, there are several responsibilities on you. Not only license, you can do this, you can't fly higher than 400. I'm just throwing a few things out there. But that's one of the biggest responsibilities, is that you are required to stay away from manned aircraft as an operator. And, you know, we've already seen some documented cases. I think it was a tennis, was it US Open or something, that a gentleman flew one of the units in and was going to try to film, and it crashed, right? Or the situation where there was a parade in Seattle, and in fact, we had just got out of a panel, a safety panel, on what's the odds on this thing going rogue, hitting something and falling down and hurting somebody. Well, again, keep in mind, we were talking about segregated areas, okay? It was like 3 days later. He loses control, it hits a building, it falls, it hits the lady on the head. I mean, you know, it's happening out there. Those type things can obviously be quickly and readily identified. They're prosecuted, and, you know, that's the way it is. So, you know, this law hopefully will be very beneficial to us, in effect August 28th, 29th.
Something like that.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
so, and the one, I was going to say, yes, we're relying right now on local law enforcement in the event where we know something's out there. But we do have we're kicking off one risk assessment this year to actually look at the probability of a non-cooperative UAS getting in the way in a terminal environment, whether, you know, what's the likelihood of it happening in a terminal environment, what's the likelihood of it actually causing some kind of an event. And the reason we're kind of looking at it is because right now, if we really wanted to detect these things via radar, we would have to reduce the radar cross-section for the radars to be able to detect the composites of the UAS. So we are doing that analysis, because right now we don't necessarily want to have to go to detecting them all. We all know that means we see a lot of other stuff too. So we'll find out what the likelihood is of, you know, the non-cooperatives in a terminal environment with some likelihood of it impacting, you know, some kind of an event, whatever the event be. But so right now, yeah, it is based on the law and the good citizen kind of thing, but we are also looking at whether we have to be more proactive than that.
Okay, well, we're done with time for this session. Well, I encourage all of you, if you are able to attend the last part of the day, which is going to get into, okay, what did we hear? What are the next steps we can take? But I understand you have your other stuff to do. We're just going to take a 15-minute break and start that up around 2:30. So, and then the audience can have more time for questions too in that last session. And so thank you very much, all the panelists. And we already thanked Randy, he's gone. But to you three, I appreciate you being here, and that was very informative, and I think will help us in the next discussion.
Thank you.